it is price means money. If we see the consideration apart from money or price apart from money, if in any contract where the consideration is not money but in terms of other, like take one example, if I am entering into a contract whereby my consideration is a exchange or goods, I'm paying my consideration in the form of goods, then my contracts become a contract as barter system but not a contract for sale of goods. In order to make a sale of goods contract, my consideration should be in terms of money but not anything otherwise. Okay, and if there is no consideration, imagine in a contract where there is no consideration, then such transfer will become it by the way of gift but not sale of goods. So you have to understand that in order to make a valid sale of goods, your consideration must be in terms of money only. Okay, now the next we are going to determine the modes of determination of price, how a buyer and seller will determine his prices. Okay, there are different modes whereby a buyer and seller determines their price or consideration. First one is fixed by contract itself. Okay, this mode, by contract itself, buyer and seller can fix their prices. This is the usual mode of contract whereby buyer and seller will opt, generally the buyer and seller opt that at the time of making contract only they'll fix the mode of paying the price. Okay, and also the next mode is fixed in accordance with an agreed manner. Here you have to remember the parties may not fix the price. Here, as we have said in first mode, the parties they themselves fix the mode, but here they don't fix the price for themselves but may leave it to be determined according to the manner agreed. You have to understand the word called manner agreed. Here manner agreed is not an usual term. Like when you see this word manner agreed, we'll understand as if the buyer and seller are agreed in some kind of manner, but it is not like that. I'll give you one example. See, in a contract of sale, a buyer and seller, they have agreed in a manner. They have agreed in a manner by which price will be determined. That means they agreed that both agreed that a price which is prevailing at the time of delivery of the goods, that is market price. At the time of delivering his goods, what would be the price in the market, such price will become the price agreed manner. Okay, market price prevailing on the date of the supply of goods will be the price to be paid by the buyer to the seller. That is agreed manner, but nothing more than that. Okay, this is the next mode. Coming to the third one, it may be determined in the course of dealing between the parties. Okay, here in this mode of determination, the buyer and seller neither they opt by contract method nor they'll go for an agreed manner. Okay, but they will determine the price in the course of dealing. What do you mean by in the course of dealing? Like we'll take one example. A buyer, there was a contract of sale of goods between a buyer and seller. Now neither they have opted for contract method nor they formed an agreed manner. Okay, just they have left the determination of price so that it can be seen in the course of dealing. At that time, how we have to infer the price, mode of determination of the price between them when they are not opting for either first method or second method. So we'll see the past transactions of the buyer or seller. Between them, what was the past transactions, how the mode of payment was there, payment was between them. So in that same sense only his subsequent transactions will fall. Okay, like subsequent transactions also So, what mode he was opting for his previous transactions, the same mode will be taken for his subsequent transactions. That is in the course of dealing. Okay. Next one is the price determined by the third party. Sometimes neither the purchaser nor the seller, they determine the price. In these three modes also they won't determine, but they both agreed that some other third person will determine the price between us. They will come into an agreement or agreed manner that for our consideration a third person will determine the price. In that situation, this is provided under section 10 clause 1. See, there was an agreement that a third person will determine the price, but what happens? By some reason the third person cannot determine or does not determine the price. Then what the buyer and seller has the options when the third person has not determined. In such manner, the contract of sale of goods, the agreement becomes avoided. Means it can be avoided by either of the parties. Okay. And see, sometimes either of the party, either seller or buyer, sometimes they prevent from doing the determination by the third party. In such case, who has made that fault, he has to compensate the loss to the other party. When either buyer or seller, if he is preventing the third person from determining the price of the goods, then the loss occurred to the other party should be compensated by the fault made party. Okay. Then moving next, when already they have entered into a contract, the third party should determine the price, but by some reason he does not determine, he did not determine the price. Meanwhile, the buyer has taken the goods or partly he has appropriated the goods. So what happens? What is the mode of price for such goods when without determination by the third party, if the buyer has appropriated the goods? Then in that case, the court will take the reasonable price as the determination for that contract. Okay, hope you understood the price, which is an essential element of the contract, which is given under section 2 clause 10, and the modes of determination is 4 modes we have. Okay, any one kind they can opt for that. Okay, next moving to that, next we'll see effect of goods perishing. So now we are dealing with goods. The goods includes perishable goods, damaged goods, and we'll see. Okay, under section 7 of Sale of Goods Act, the goods perishing before making of contract. What do you mean by before making of contract? There was under section 7, I'll read the definition for you. Section 7 read as follows: where there is a contract for sale of specific goods, at the time of contract, when made without the knowledge of the seller, the specific goods which form subject matter of the contract have perished or become so damaged that they no longer answer to their description in the contract, such contract is void. That means both the buyer and seller, they have entered into a contract for sale of goods, but without the knowledge of the seller, the goods have been damaged at the time of contract without the knowledge of seller. Then in that case, even though they have entered into the contract becomes void. Okay, why? Because there is an implied condition that the goods must be existence at the time of contract under section 7. Okay, and as I said, the section 7 is applicable to specific goods but not to uncertain goods. Okay, what are specific goods and uncertain goods? Please refer my previous video. This is a specific good which have been damaged without the knowledge of seller. The both parties have entered into a contract, but that contract becomes void because there is an implied condition that the goods must be in existence at the time of contract. Example, you can take A has entered into a contract with B for supply of 1000 cement bags. Okay, at the time of contract without the knowledge of the seller, those 1,000 cement bags have been damaged by the rainwater. Okay, such contract which has become impossible to perform is void under Sale of Goods Act. Okay, it's clear. Now moving on to section 8. Section 8, it deals with agreement to sell. Like a seller and buyer, they have entered into a contract for sale of goods. Okay, first they entered into an agreement to sell. Okay, after entering into an agreement to sell, but before contract to sale, in between the goods have been damaged. Then what happens? Who has to bear the risk? Who will be liable for such losses? We have to see. That is being given under section 8. Goods perishing before sale and after agreement to sell. Okay, here you have to remember that the goods have perished after agreement to sell. Since it is after agreement to sell and before the contract of sale, the property in the goods have not been passed to the buyer. Since the property in the goods have not passed to the buyer, then the liability will, or the risk of loss is on the seller. Since the property in the goods did not pass to the buyer, the risk also will not pass to the buyer. All the damages and the losses shall be borne by the seller himself. Okay, this contract you can infer like this: the contract when made is valid. At the time of agreement to sell, it is valid, but later on it has become void. Okay, due to the goods damaged. Okay. Hope you understood the effect of goods perishing under section 7 and section 8. Okay. Next, moving on to sale distinction from analogous contracts. There are different kinds of similar contracts to sale. You need to understand the difference between both. Okay. First, we will deal with sale versus agreement to sell. Till now, what do you mean by sale? Sale means here sale of goods. Okay, transfer or agrees to transfer the property in the goods to the buyer for a price. Okay, now you have to make distinction between sale and agreement to sell. In case of sale, the property in the goods transfer from seller to buyer at the time of contract itself. In case of sale, the ownership or property in the goods transfer from seller to buyer at the time of contract, whereas in case of agreement to sell, the ownership is postponed and it doesn't transfer immediately. It is being postponed for the future time until certain conditions are fulfilled, because this is an absolute transfer. Contract to sale is an absolute transfer, whereas agreement to sell is a conditional transfer. Next, what about losses or damages to the property? See, since the property in the goods is transferred immediately from seller to buyer in case of sale, along with that ownership or property in the goods, the risk or losses also transfers from seller to buyer immediately. Whereas in agreement to sell, seller, he is not a buyer, he is not a owner of the goods in case of agreement to sell. So immediately the risk or losses will not carry on to the buyer. Such losses or damages shall be borne by the seller himself in case of agreement to sell. Okay. Now we'll see the non-performance of contract. If a buyer he has refused to accept the goods. There was a contract for sale whereby the buyer refused to accept the goods. What options are available to the seller in case of sale? What remedies are available to the seller? Seller may sue for price of the goods in case of contract of sale. He may sue for price of the goods. Whereas in agreement to sell, what options are available to the seller? since the goods are retained with himself only, because the goods have not been delivered to the buyer, the seller here, he can resell it to the another person and sue for damages. It's not price, it is damages for his non-acceptance. Okay, and next one, for sale is an executed contract, whereas agreement to sell is an executory contract. What do you mean by executed contract? Because since here under sale there was a contract plus conveyance of goods, means transfer of goods, delivery of goods or possession, everything. There is a conveyance of the goods from seller to buyer, so it is an executed contract. Whereas agreement to sell, where the conveyance is postponed, the conveyance part is pending, so it is an executory contract. And next, in case of breach by either of the party to the contract of sale, then under sale, in case of breach for contract of sale, the party has the remedy of right in rem, where he gets damages plus also torts. Okay, he can sue for tort also in case of sale, contract of sale. Whereas for agreement to sell, the remedy is right in persona, means the seller or buyer, he can sue a party at default, but he cannot sue everyone. Okay, now moving to next one. Riti? Okay. Next, moving to next classification. Next, we'll make distinction between sale versus hire purchase. It is a very important concept you need to understand, and just follow my class so that you understand it in a better way. Okay. What do you mean by sale? Sale is, according to section 4 clause 1, a transfer or agrees to transfer the property in the goods from the seller to buyer for a price, according to section clause 4 clause 1. Whereas hire purchase is also a type of agreement or a type of contract, like our contract for sale of goods, but you need to understand the difference between both. Generally students get confused in case of hire purchase. Okay, first I'll give an example with which you can easily understand that. See, hire purchase. See, I want a washing machine. Okay, I want it in an installment, so I don't have money, I wanted to purchase it in an installment mode, so I went to take example, I went to Bajaj Electronics. I went in and asked for a washing machine. So now he has agreed for that. He has took some documents from me and signatures from me, and he has given washing machine for me. What is the mode of payment by me? That I'll pay in installments, but I have taken the delivery of goods. This generally will happen. This is the transaction which I have done. So when you compare this transaction with hire purchase agreement, see, this is generally a goods we are taking on installments. Generally they go for hire purchases. Everything the goods we are taking on installments are fall into the category of hire purchase. We now the same transaction, I'll compare it with hire purchase. So since I am going to the shop for taking a washing machine, I will be called as hirer. See, I being a buyer called as hirer, and the shop owner, since he is selling his washing machine to me, since he is a seller, he will be called as hire vendor. So hirer and hire vendor. Now every month I have to pay installments, EMIs. So the paying in installments every month is known as hire charges. What the buyer will pay for seller is called as hire charges. Okay, now every month I have paid, I have taken the possession of the goods. Here you have to remember, I have taken the possession of goods. The ownership still remains with the seller. The ownership still is with the seller only. I have taken only possession of the goods. So what happens when I have paid the last installment? So after paying my last installment, I have the option of transferring that goods on my name without consideration. All the installments which I have previously paid become the consideration for my transfer of ownership. So now the goods have been transferred. Take an example that the same washing machine, after 1 year in between, it stopped working. So what I have done is I have stopped paying installments now. After 1 year, I have paid installments because it is not working. I am not satisfied. I have stopped paying washing machine. What are my liabilities and rights available now? What I have to do? In this condition, my right, I can stop paying the installments. Okay. What is the right available to the seller in that situation is seller can resume the possession of the goods. The possession he can resume means he can take the washing machine back to his place. Okay. I cannot object him. That is his right. Taking the goods or resuming the possession of the goods is the right of the seller, and my right as a buyer is I'll stop paying the installments. And what is the liability on the seller? He cannot demand the further EMIs or part payment which had been with me. He cannot demand that. And what is my right? I need not pay further installments. It is my right. And what is my liability here? I cannot demand